On today's episode, you will hear three disturbing roommate stories. One man is forced to spy on his housemate for dangerous criminals. Another discovers his roommate's disturbing obsession with things that will leave your stomach churning. And one tenant begins waking up in the middle of the night to his sleepwalking roommate, whose escalating behavior becomes too much to handle. Hear all of these terrifying tales right now. Hey, my name is Parker, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in the 80s and 90s. I did not do great in school, so I dropped out when I was 17 and got a job working in a bar to make some money. I stuck around for several years, learning all the tricks of the trade. By the time I reached my early 20s, I was practically running the place under the guidance of the old owner and manager. That bar was my meal ticket, so I ran a tight ship. If you ask me, we had the best bar in the area. It turns out someone else thought so too, and that someone ended up making me a job offer I could not refuse. There was this upscale restaurant in the city, and the guy I served drinks to that night was the owner. He wanted me to be the place's new general manager once the current one turned over his keys at the end of the month, and he was willing to pay me very handsomely for my services. I said thank you and goodbye to the old crew, moved to the city, and spent the next few weeks getting over the imposter syndrome as I settled into my new role. I loved my job, but the best thing about the move by far was my new apartment. Aside from the steep rent, there were basically no downsides. It was a really nice neighborhood, and when I say it was quiet, I mean it was crazy just how peaceful it was. That was in no small part down to my roommate, named Dylan. Dylan was, in a word, a ghost. It actually took a whole 3 weeks after moving in before I met him. I tried knocking on his door a few times and got no answer every single time. I was just getting home from work late one night when I ran into him in the lobby while he was headed out. The dude looked legitimately spooked to see me at first. Even after I introduced myself as his new neighbor, he did not seem to warm up at all. He was not rude, really, just anxious. After he said he worked in tech, I invited him up for a beer sometime, and he replied very nervously, "Yeah, sure, maybe," in a way that suggested he was never going to do that. But hey, there are worse things than a quiet roommate, right? So I was not really complaining. I lived there for several months without anything to complain about, besides the rain, of course, until one day when my awesome brand new life turned into a complete nightmare. It started toward the end of a typical workday. I finished up, said goodbye to everyone, and locked up for the night. As I was walking along, waiting for a vacant cab to appear, a black sedan with tinted windows rolled up next to me. I could spend a paragraph or two describing the guy who appeared in the open back window, but nothing really sums him up better than a heavy-set man with a thick Boston accent. He was bald, he talked like he owned the world, and he even laughed like he was in on some private joke. The only difference was this guy in the back seat must have had at least 60 pounds on him. In that loud Boston accent, he says to me, "Hey buddy, how's it going?" I told him fine, that I was on my way home. He responded, "Well, why do not you jump in? I will give you a ride." I told the guy I would rather wait for a cab. He said, "You are the manager of that restaurant, right?" When I said yes, he told me that was what he wanted to talk to me about. If I got into his car and went for a ride with him, I might just find myself looking at a very lucrative money-making opportunity, both for me and the restaurant. I hesitated, but he gave me this look and said, "Ah, come on. What do you think I'm gonna do? Just get in. Even if it is a no on what I have got to say, you got yourself a free ride home. I was not some guy incapable of defending myself, so I got in and we took off, and I listened to what he had to say. But from the moment he started talking, I knew I had made a huge mistake. The first thing he said was basically, "All right, I am going to come clean. I do not give a crap about your crummy job, but you are in the car now, so shut up and listen." The guy's demeanor shifted completely after I got in the car, and I cannot lie. It definitely made me a little nervous when he forcibly told me to shut up. It was not just him and a driver either. There was a guy in the passenger seat looking around and very much mean-mugging me. The heavy-set man started off by saying that since he knew where I lived and he knew where I worked, we would be seeing plenty of each other in the future. There was no point hiding or any of that crap, as he put it. But if I kept cool and did my job, then like he said, there was money in it for me. All I had to do was find a way of getting into my roommate's part of the house so I could look for something for him. It was really small, and so small that he might be able to hide it in some pretty creative places. So I would have to look long and hard if I wanted to find it. But when I did find it, he did not want me to take it. He just wanted me to let him know that it was there and, more importantly, where it was being hidden. I remember kind of reflexively saying, "I cannot do that." To which he responded that not only could I do what he asked, but I would. He said I did not look stupid, so he knew I would do the right thing and do as he asked. I asked what would happen if I did not, and the implications were clear. He said I would recognize the thing he wanted me to find from the letters DFNTL written on it. I did not have to memorize it, though. I do not even think it was those exact letters either, to be honest. But it would be the only thing in his place with those letters on it. And then, when I found it, all I had to do was tell him it was there. He left a kind of pause, waiting for me to say something. But all I could bring myself to ask was if he was like with the CIA or the FBI or something. The guy laughed, and then told me if he was, he would just arrest me and throw my ass in a cell, then threaten me with prison time till I cooperated. But since he was not, since he was a nice guy, as he put it, he was going to pay me to do it instead. On the other hand, he could make a phone call to some associates of his who would head over to my place in the middle of the night and beat the location of the object out of my roommate. But he knew that it would be noisy and messy and have the cops crawling around. And since I probably had my own stuff going on, I most likely did not want that. Just to make it clear, I did not have my own stuff going on, and I would have been more than happy to have gotten the cops involved there and then. But he had that whole thing covered with the next part of his little speech. He said the cops were dumb and could not run a goddamned bath, let alone a city. They were also more corrupt than an NBA ref, at least according to him anyway. So, if I talked to them and made any kind of report about him or what was going on with my roommate, he would know, and there would be trouble. By this point, I was just a complete mess in my head, and all my energy was going toward not showing that. My head was spinning. I could feel myself sweating. At one point, I was legitimately thinking, this cannot be happening. I passed out on the pavement, and this fever dream is occurring right now. But it was not. What was occurring to me in that moment was real, and there was no getting out of it. The heavy-set man even picked up on how scared I was after he directed his driver to take me home. He started saying how I did not have to worry about a thing if I just did as he told me. There was no time limit on it either, since my priority was almost not alerting my roommate that I was going through his stuff. He said if I spooked him, he might leave, and I really did not want him to do that. If I did, he might leave and take that little object with him, which was something he would not allow to happen. I tried once again to tell him that I was not right for the job, that I would mess it up, and he should just find someone more professional. He responded with a pee-wee baseball coach, saying stuff like, "Sure you can, kid. You are his roomie. I am sure he trusts you." He added that Dylan might even have the object that I was looking for lying around on a coffee table or something. All I needed to do was head down there with a six-pack while the game was on and take a little look around after asking him to use the bathroom. I remember telling the man that Dylan was not that kind of person, but he only said, "I am sure you will think of something, kid. You will see." A few minutes later, the guy was dropping me off a block over from my place, saying he would be in touch the following week. I got out feeling numb as I walked back to my place. I spent the next few hours wondering what in God's name I was going to do. I tried asking the guy his name before I got out. I tried asking who they were with, too. I got answers to neither, and the guy just said, "It is not important." After asking me not to slam his door too hard, he and his boys took off into the night. I did not even try to memorize the license plate because I believed every word of what he said about the cops. Even if he did not have anyone on his payroll, they would not be able to protect me from him. Not in the short term anyway. So really, what choice did I have other than to do what that weirdo said? I spent the next couple of days fixating on two things. First, I wondered how the heck I was going to get into Dylan's place without alerting him. Second, I wondered who the hell he was to have landed himself in so much trouble. All I knew was that he was anemic looking, worked in tech, and liked to stay out all night. If he was just some nerd, why not snatch him off the street, kind of like they did with me, and then get what they wanted that way? And if it was that important, why not just kick his door down in the middle of the night? Why get me involved? Was Dylan dangerous? And if so, how? Those are all of the thoughts that were running through my head over the next week or so. Since I did not know the first thing about robbery or burglary, I figured my best chance was to sort of fake a break-in. I could make it look like something it was not. If the little labeled object I was looking for did not move, then maybe he would not take off with it. I was still toying with that idea the next time I ran into the man in the black sedan. I was walking to my car after work when I spotted his car. While I had been just about flinching at anything that looked like it for the past week, this was the real deal. The back door swung open, and I heard that same thick Boston accent say, "Hey buddy, what do you say we have ourselves a little talk?" I thought about running, but I knew that would just piss him off. So I climbed into the back seat with him, and we had ourselves that little talk. At first, he asked me how things were going, if I'd made any moves yet, stuff like that. I was honest with him. I told him I was still in the planning stages, that I was pretty inexperienced with things like that, and that he would have to give me more time, a lot more time to get it done. The guy kind of nodded, but added that he did not have all the time in the world, so I should start making moves now. That is when the second part happened, the scary part. Because when I once again suggested that I was not the right guy for the job because I did not have the moves he was referring to, and I was sure that I would mess things up. The guy asked me, "So, how is Annie doing?" The question had the color draining from my face. I literally felt lightheaded when he said it, like a damned bobblehead just trying to keep my head pointed the right way up. My heart started beating faster. I got that cold, sweaty feeling all over again. Try as I might, I could not stop my hands from shaking, because Annie was my grandmother's name. I did not act like some tough guy. I did not tell him, "If you ever lay a finger on her," or anything like that. I was just too stunned to speak. I stayed too stunned until the guy reassured me that she was not in danger. He just wanted to know how she was doing. I did not answer him. I just told him I would have the job done by the time he expected. That is when the third portion of our conversation commenced, and he gave me a little advice. He told me to case the place, familiarize myself with it, and to do it soon. The guy then smiled, asked me not to slam his door again, and that marked the end of our second meeting. I thought about what he said about casing the place. For those who do not know, that is basically the word criminals use for recon, or scouting out or looking around. Getting a look at the place before I actually looked for the thing would give me an idea of where everything was and where I most likely needed to look. So, as strange as it might sound, I tried the idea I originally dismissed and showed up at Dylan's door with a 6-pack of beer, some energy drinks, and 2 boxes of that chef's choice sushi. I figured I could pass the whole thing off as a sort of thanks for being a cool neighbor gift. Even if he did not drink, I could talk my way inside with that good sushi that I brought. But even so, getting inside was no easy task. When I knocked on his door, Dylan obviously did not seem too excited on letting me inside. A few weeks back, I would have put that all on him being nothing more than shy, an anxious person maybe. But right then, I knew there was something bigger going on. That did not stop me from keeping my cool. I guess that was down to me not having to pretend to be interested in him. I had been wondering about what he did, how he lived, and what his part of the house looked like for months by that point. I did not have to put on some Oscar-winning performance to make that believable for him. I only really sold the idea of me coming inside by saying I would basically never ask him again. All I wanted to do was get a feel for my not-so-new roomie, and then I would leave him in peace like I usually did. He still did not want to, and that much was obvious. But he knew that accepting my offer meant that I would leave him alone in the long run. So he invited me inside. Dylan's place was spotless. The decor was minimal and monochrome, and he did not have a television that I could even see. He had those 2 huge bookcases filled to bursting with all kinds of computer and tech-centric books. After he put the sushi in his refrigerator, he showed me around a little, not saying all that much, but just trying to be polite, I guess. I started asking about his job, and he said he worked mostly from home. When I asked to see his setup, he lost what little of the friendliness he had about him and just said no. I tried to play it off like I was just being curious. I was not set on inspecting every nook and cranny, even though I was. But then, as I carried on getting vague non-answers to my questions about his job, I was looking around the room and seeing a lot of security cameras. I saw a lot. There were 3 of them set up around the living space and kitchen. All pretty sleek and small ones too. But that was 3 more than I had. Seeing as they made my job that little bit harder, I could not help but ask about them. I turned it into a little joke, I suppose, asking if he was just paranoid or if I needed that kind of equipment for my own part of the house. Dylan just kind of looked at me like he could not think of an explanation, and then murmured something about how it was good to be safe. He did not seem like a bad guy, you know? I mean, maybe it was just how scared he was, but I could not imagine him really doing much harm to anyone or really anything. He was just some computer nerd, one that had done pretty good in life to afford that kind of living arrangement, but a computer nerd nonetheless. If the mysterious, heavy-set man in the black sedan was sort of like the villain of the story, then maybe Dylan was the victim. If both things were true, then I figured it presented me with the perfect opportunity to make myself the hero. Maybe the phrasing of that makes me sound a little up my own ass or whatever, but I can promise you fear and the relief of having extracted myself from a difficult situation were also very strong motivators here. I knew that I did not have it in me to get all Mission Impossible and break in there after deactivating his cameras and hacking his computer and blah, blah, blah Hollywood nonsense. I had to talk to the guy. I mean, really talk to him so we could figure out something together. It was not something I planned before walking into his place. The urge just sort of took me then and there. When I asked him again why the cameras were there, and I got another non-answer about security, I asked if the reason he wanted security was because he had taken something that did not belong to him. The second I asked him, the friendliness dropped away again. Only that time he looked frightened too. He asked who I was, like who I really was, because I guess he figured I worked for someone. In response, I literally said, nobody. Absolutely nobody. And I wanted to stay that way too. Before he had a chance to really panic or anything, I told him exactly what happened with the heavy-set man in the black sedan and how he seemed to know everything, how he was threatening my grandmother, and how he was looking for something that was DFNTL, or whatever the label was. I added that all he wanted me to do was report back on where I had found it and not to take it. So, whatever it was, he could just leave it someplace, tell me where, and then get the hell out of town before the sedan man's goons showed up to collect it, it seemed. I figured they would collect him along with it. While that would be rough on my conscience, it would most likely be even worse for him. Worse, Dylan agreed, and he actually got kind of emotional as he thanked me for telling him. But I was still very much in the mode of, we need to fix this crap, and now. I had to sort of hurry along the buddy-buddy moment and figure out what we were going to do and what was going on. Dylan said he needed to copy what was on that drive, as he called it, and he also needed to erase and destroy all the computer stuff he had before leaving, including the time he needed to pack some stuff and arrange for someplace else to stay. He figured he could be gone in about 12 hours. When he left, he would leave that DFNTL drive tucked behind the back of a picture frame hanging from a wall in his workspace. That is where I could tell the guy that I had found it. Since I could not do that until the next time I saw him, Dylan would have plenty of time to get far, far away from the city. He tried to thank me again, but I would not accept it because it was now all on him to make sure our little deception was not uncovered. He needed to put that drive exactly where he said he would leave it. He needed to keep the hell away from the entire area for all I cared, because if they found out I had helped him, then we would both be screwed. Dylan promised he would disappear and that the men threatening my grandmother would find what they were looking for, just not the only copy of it. He only very cryptically reassured me that whatever was on that drive, its release could not be traced back to the agreement we had made. I do not know if that was true or not at the time, but I guess me still breathing is a testament to Dylan's honesty. At the time, though, nothing could have fully reassured me. After shaking his hand and wishing him luck, I went out to my part of the house. In the morning, he was gone. I honestly thought dealing with the situation would be like a weight off my shoulders. After all, I had done what was asked of me and located that little drive. So what else was there to worry about? Well, it turns out a whole lot, actually, because I still needed the heavy-set man in the sedan to buy my story and believe that I had not tipped Dylan off before he vanished. At times, I thought about vanishing myself, because if this guy saw through my act, and he was probably going to do just that since he seemed to know everything anyway, then I was screwed. Even if they got the little drive they wanted, the guy would be pissed that I had lied to him. Big, successful criminals do not get that way by being nice and forgiving, do they? A few days go by, and then lo and behold, I finish work one night to see that same black car sitting a few spaces down from my own. The back door opens up as I approach, and then I sit down in the back seat with that smiling jackass sitting next to me. I did not have to act like I was sick of seeing him. Neither did I need to act nervous about the drive being where Dylan said he would leave it. So, all in all, I guess I was pretty convincing when I said they needed to make their move so that the drive would still be in the place I found it when they did. I remember saying something along the lines of, "I am not having you guys blame me if he moves it. I did my part already. Now leave me the hell alone." The guy starts laughing that Bill Burr laugh of his, and then told me to calm down and that he would make their move that night. He said, I better go check into a hotel or something. I should concoct a story about meeting up with a girl or something to that effect if anyone asks, because when the cops got involved, it would be easier for me to just say, I did not see anything, because I was not there. The last thing I said, and I figured this would be the last thing I ever said to the guy, was, what about my money? Do not think I was dumb enough to expect to get paid. I am not that naive when it comes to the criminal underworld, but I also figured not asking would maybe raise suspicions somehow. So I did. I am sure this will not come as a surprise to any of you with fully functioning brains. But when I asked to be paid, the guy just laughed that laugh of his and asked me why he would pay me for something I just did for free. I took the guy's advice. I did not want to make him think that I had a whole parallel plan going on. So I got the hotel room. The next morning, when I made my way back to my car and drove home, one of the front doors had been smashed open, and Dylan's apartment had been broken into as well. I called the cops, acted totally ignorant of everything, and just like the guy said, I was able to sort of say I did not see anything because I was in a hotel with a girl that I met at work. A uniformed cop later asked me why I had not brought the girl back to my place, but he seemed satisfied when I looked very sheepish and told him that we did not want her husband finding out. He gave me one hell of a judgmental look, but he did not question anything further. I then had the landlord call me to ask me what the hell was going on, and she stopped by that same afternoon to take a look around. She seemed relieved that Dylan's place was the only one targeted, and that neither of us had been home when whoever it was broke in. After that, I thought that was pretty much it. that I had somehow navigated dealing with some big-shot gangster without getting anyone hurt. Given enough time, the info or whatever that Dylan got away with might get around to biting that heavy-set man on his fat ass. But then came the night he and his boys showed up outside work again in their big black sedan with its tinted windows. I did not have to act or play pretend when I responded, "I thought we were done. What else do you want from me?" But that time, the heavy-set man did not play pretend either. He did not say, "Oh, hey buddy, how is it going?" like he normally did. He just leaned out a little and then growled at me to get in the car before he had his guy drag me in. I knew that was the last time, or, I did not. But that is what I told myself as I headed for the car. Just one more time, and then this whole goddamn nightmare is over. I thought it would be the easiest one with all the hard stuff having been gone. I even figured that the guy might even see it good to pay me now that he had gotten what he wanted. But that is not what happened. After I climbed into the back and one of the heavy-set man's goons closed the door behind me, I tried to basically go on the offensive. Any kind of nervousness, and I might as well just write, "I tipped him off," on my forehead with a Sharpie. But even after saying, "What do you want now, dude? You said we were done," he completely shut me down by saying, "I know what you did." I had to keep going. I could not just quit right there and then. So I pushed back, saying, "Yeah, you do. I risked going to jail for you, maybe even got myself shot. But here you are, still bothering me." I did not get past the "here you are" part before they cut me off again. Told me the only reason I was still alive was because he could not prove that I had tipped off my roommate. He admitted to getting his hands on that drive, the one with the DFNTL code on it. But as I suspected, he wanted his hands on Dylan too. He was angry that he slipped through his fingers. He asked me straight up if I had tipped him off. When I said no, he just rolled his eyes and called me a lying sack of crap. He then told me that, for my information, I should know that a body washed up on the beach that very morning. The cops thought it was my roommate Dylan, but the heavy-set man knew it was not. He said the reason the cops were so convinced it was Dylan was because the body that they found had Dylan's teeth. But it was not Dylan. The heavy-set man wanted me to know that the blood of that random homeless dude was on my hands and not his. That was the only time I could not hold up my act anymore. The heavy-set man saw it. He then said, "Oh, you did not think about that part, did you, kid? You did not really take the time to find out who your little roommate was, huh?" I think I must have stammered or made some gesture because he seemed to know what I was going to say and anticipated it with, "He did not need to know, so we did not tell you. Even if you did not tell him anything, you had one job to do, kid, and you messed it up." I remember telling the most unconvincing lie ever, saying, "I swear I did not tell him." But all that guy said in response was, "Get out of my car," before reminding me once again not to slam his door. That was the last I saw of the heavy-set man. I was not sure, and I'm still not 100% sure if this guy just sort of made all that stuff up as a way of making me feel guilty. Killing me was just more trouble. Beating the crap out of me and giving me a real reason to go to the cops was just more trouble. But planning something like that in my head, a lie that I could never really confirm or disprove, I think that was supposed to be his parting shot. I am happy to say that it did not hit the target. Not after a while, anyway. I did a whole bunch of digging online, and not a single body has been brought in from the beach all year, the last being maybe 18 months previous to this. So the heavy-set man just had to have been lying. I think Dylan was not a bad guy. He might have done something dumb to have the mob on his ass like that, but I feel pretty confident that I had done the right thing in warning him. I still feel that way, and I feel like I managed to navigate my ship through some very stormy waters. Somehow, I managed to thread the needle in a way that saved both mine and Dylan's asses. I feel pretty proud of myself sometimes, and it reminds me that taking the hard road and doing the right thing, even when it is tough and scary, is always the right way to go. But if I go the rest of my life never having to make tough choices like that again, I will be a very happy man. Wherever Dylan is these days, I hope he is okay, and that he and that heavy-set man will never cross paths again. My name is Corey, and I am a grad student here in the city, and I just managed to escape from the worst roommate I have ever had. I have been a fan of stories like this for a while now, and I have always kind of hoped that I would never have a reason to contribute. I thought I could just listen to everyone else's creepy stories and never experience one of my own. But I guess that all changed when I met Brent. I will not bore you with all the ins and outs of my housing situation last year, but let us just say that I needed a place to stay, and I needed it badly. I ended up going to view a single room in a shared apartment where my roomie would be a guy called Brent. Brent was not there during the viewing, and I am guessing that not only was that on purpose, but the landlord had the place scrubbed down to make it look like a regular sane person lived there. After some couch surfing, I moved in on a 6-month contract starting the first of the month. When I first met Brent, I had absolutely no measure of what a creep he was going to be. He seemed like a quiet guy, into his old-school heavy metal with his long red hair and beard. I honestly figured the only issue might be loud music or something like that. But pretty quickly, Brent showed his character. The first thing, and probably the least creepy thing relative to everything else, was his music. He played bass guitar, and at first, me and him were pretty cool. So I asked him what band he was into after hearing him play one day. He was into much more extreme stuff, but we talked about bands like Sabbath, Zeppelin, and my personal favorite AC/DC for a while, and it was cool to find some shared interests. Then Brent asked if I wanted to listen to something he wrote. I responded saying, "Sure, go ahead." He gets out his phone and starts playing this recording that is just his bass line and a drum track. It sounded pretty cool at first, like kind of creepy sounding, but still pretty good. It kind of reminded me of that one song by Megadeth. Some vocals kicked in. Something kind of weird sounding I had to almost concentrate on to hear. But then I realized I was not hearing anyone singing. It sounded like a young woman talking, and she sounded very upset. I figured it was some kind of spoken word thing that he was working on with someone. But then, as the girl kept on talking, I realized that she was the survivor of a violent assault, and that she was recounting her experiences either in court or some kind of police tape. I said, "Dude, is it real?" And not like a sort of, "Oh man, that is cool" kind of way, like a "what the hell" kind of way. But Brent just smiled and nodded, and then started telling me about the exact crime it was from and things like that. I did not say it to his face, but I thought using that audio was in very, very poor taste. But like I said, I did not want to start an argument or cause any tension. So, I just palmed him off with something like, "Good art is always provocative, I guess," and then turned our talk onto something else. I only had to live with a guy, and I did not think his weird taste in tunes meant that he was a serial killer or anything like that. But then, I guess in that department, the thing he did next did him no favors. So I come home, I am hungry, I open the fridge, and there is a bunch of what looks like organ meats in unlabeled jars. The whole fridge stinks like vinegar. I felt like his stepdad or something going up to his room and asking him like, "Hey buddy, what is that you left in the refrigerator there? It is awfully stinky for shared food storage, do not you think?" Brent is just sitting there blasted out of his skull and listening to the Melvins. While, yes, the Melvins rule, they do not pair well with pickled organ meats. Brent apologized, told me they were sort of not so live models for an art project that he was working on, and said that he would have them out of the fridge by the end of the week. Again, this was not so bad, because while it was not nice looking at a shriveled up pig's heart every time I grabbed some creamer, it was not affecting my quality of life or anything like that. But then, come the end of the week, the way Brent chose to dispose of those organs pushed things to a whole other level. I woke up to take a leak at about 4 in the morning, and I had to be up at 6:30. So I am pissed that I am actually losing out on sleep. I hit the upstairs hallway in my boxers, breathing through my nose, all half asleep, and then bam! This smell like sour death just punches me in the nose. I can hear frying coming from downstairs, so I kinda knew what Brent was doing before I saw it, but I went down anyway to make sure. When I saw him frying those pickled organs in a goddamn pan, I said, "Dude, what the actual hell are you doing right now?" Again, Brent was all apologies, like he always was. I promise that is not a Nirvana reference, but that time I was actually pissed off, because once I went back up to bed, all I could smell was that sour death smell after it had gotten into my room. I could not go back to sleep at all, half because of the smell, and half because of how mad I was that he would try and cook that crap at 4 in the goddamn morning. It made him sick too, like he pretty much occupied the bathroom for the next 48 hours, meaning that I was relegated to peeing in bottles whenever he was camped out in there, or whenever I was too scared to witness the aftermath. That kind of knocked the pep out of him for a while, I suppose, because there was no more weird behavior out of Brent, at least none I could see. The next thing happened maybe a couple of weeks later, when I came home to find a piece of meat hanging from some string he had tied to a cabinet handle, just sort of hanging there over the workspace. It did not have a hook going through it like you might be imagining. It was sort of all wrapped up and tied in a string, but then the string had little tiny pieces of metal hooked on them, and so the meat looked like it had maybe 4 or 5 of these little metal tags on it. Each tag had weird little symbols on it that were different to the others. Right away, I am thinking, Brent, what the hell, man? While I wanted to just toss it because it was freaking dripping onto the counter, I just wrapped it up in plastic and put it in the fridge for him. Brent comes home asking why I moved his meat, and then asked me not to do it again because he was curing it. I asked him if he put any salt on it, like fully knowing that he did not, because I saw it. When he said no, I said you needed to put a lot of salt on it if he wanted to cure it. He says, "Oh, okay, thanks." When I visit the kitchen, there it is again. No salt, no rub, no nothing. It is just there. I looked up how to cure meat, And what I read says you actually do have to put it in the fridge while it is salted. At that point, I am thinking, okay, why the hell is he lying to me? I did not want to argue with him. I like the quiet life, you know? Instead of actually telling him what a disgusting creep he was being with his little Hellraiser ornament, I very politely suggested that he keep his meat in his bedroom so he was not making the kitchen unsanitary. I also added that he was going to make it a safety issue. I had no choice but to contact the landlord. I was not a dick about it. It was more like just work with me, dude. Since he was not a total asshole, Brent agreed to do just that and keep his meat in his room.
The final straw was when the smell of rotten meat started seeping out from under his bedroom door. It was not long before I noticed an uptick of flies in our apartment. I got in touch with the landlord and asked him to perform some kind of apartment inspection so he could personally tell Brent to stop just letting raw meat rot in his bedroom. He said he was busy for a couple of days and he would be over the first chance he got.
Before then, I realized why the apartment was starting to smell worse and worse. It was not just seeping out from Brent's door. He was hiding pieces of it around the apartment and letting it rot.
He did not get violent or yell at me when I confronted him about it. He gave me some evil-looking death stare, but he did not say anything. He just slammed his bedroom door in my face, told me he did not want to talk to me anymore. At that, I called the landlord again and told him not to bother coming over, or at least not on my behalf anyway, because I wanted out. I still had to pay him a month's rent at the start of the month, but I honestly thought it was worth it just to get away from Brent and that apartment. I think the landlord is a scumbag because I figured that he deliberately hid Brent's character from me, who, by the way, was having his rent paid by his goddamn parents. I also used to wonder how he could afford to live there without any discernible source of income, but on the way out, the landlord mentioned it and it all suddenly made sense. The same landlord actually offered me an alternative place to stay, but there was no way in hell that I was about to trust him again. Not after he basically tricked me into living with a freak like Brent. So let me tell you a story about how the best living situation I ever had turned into the worst living situation I ever had. Why there has never been a truer statement than never judge a book by its cover. So, many moons ago now, I was looking for places to live in the city I'm at when I came across this pretty amazing apartment while going through the listings. The decor is awesome. It is all furnished, and it was maybe 15 minutes walk away from my job too, so literally perfect in almost every possible way. The only drawback was that it was a shared apartment. I was not completely averse to living with someone, but I also knew that if there was a clash of personalities or something like that, then things could get pretty tense pretty quick. I had previously lived with a guy. I am a guy myself, by the way, who could only be safely described as a Neolithic savage because if I go into any detail, I will probably get this video flagged if you actually read it. My point is, I knew that there was no point in me living in that place if the roomie was going to be difficult. I asked the landlord if I could meet him during the viewing. That is how I met Gavin. Gavin seemed like the dream roommate, honestly. He said he worked a lot and that he liked going to the gym and all of that in his spare time. When he said that he would be out of the apartment a lot, he was not kidding. I had the whole place to myself pretty much all day every day. The only times that I would catch him chilling on the couch was when the game was on, or when he had an injury or something like that. Even when he was home, I was stoked to have him around. He was a funny guy. He was clean and he was chill too, so generally nice and easy to live with. But then came the night when everything changed. The place had these 2 big bedrooms, these ensuite bathrooms, the works. Mine had a lock on the door too, but I did not think that I would need it. Gavin was a respectful and mature enough person to knock before entering and whatnot. While I briefly considered using the lock, in the end I was sort of thinking, why bother? I had been living there for just over a month with absolutely zero complaints all around. The whole time, Gavin was the ideal roomie. But then one night, I woke up needing to pee in the middle of the night like usual. When I rolled over in bed, all I could see was this dark figure standing by the open doorway. I freaking screamed so loud, I pretty much dived backwards off the bed, still screaming at the top of my lungs. By the time I grabbed the little folding knife I kept in the drawer, Gavin had switched on the light. It was him standing there in his underwear. As weird as it might sound, he was just as surprised as I was. You see, Gavin was not aware that he had got up out of bed and walked into my bedroom because he had been sleepwalking. I said he probably should have just told me that once I had moved in. As it turned out, Gavin had not done any sleepwalking for years. He said he used to do it a bunch when he was a kid, especially after he and his family moved house one time, and he figured it was probably the change of me moving in having triggered it or something. He said that he would never have neglected to mention it if he had been actively sleepwalking. I just wanted to get to sleep, honestly. So I just told him everything was fine and then went back to bed. The next morning, I texted him to say basically, "Hey, sorry if that was weird, and I am sorry about your condition coming back. I hope everything is okay." He told me we were good, but that maybe I should start locking my door in the future. I texted him back saying, "Sure thing, Captain Obvious," with maybe a laughing emoji. We were pals again. From then on, I started locking my door at night, but it also was not like Gavin was not doing anything about it. He said he went to some doctor who gave him a prescription for mild sleeping pills, and then for about a week or so, there was nothing. Then one night, I am asleep in bed, and I hear bang, 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 bang on my bedroom door. Once again, I am just about jumping out of bed, but since Gavin is knocking, I figured that he must be awake. So I asked him what is up, but I get zero response. I knew he must have been sleepwalking, so I called out to him to say, hey, wake up, all that kind of stuff. But again, I got no reply. I got up out of bed thinking, please do not make this a regular thing. When I opened up the door, there's Gavin, buck naked, with his eyes all rolled up in their sockets, so all I could see was the whites. I yelled something, slammed the door, and I think that is what woke him up because the next thing I hear is him saying sorry and then running back to his room, still apologizing. I did not follow him. I was mad, but what the hell could I do? The guy had some serious condition. It was not really his fault. I went back to sleep, went to work the next morning, and then called Gavin at lunch to see how he was doing. He kept apologizing for waking me up, but I made it clear that as long as he was seeking help, then it was fine because sooner or later the issue would be resolved. That is aside from the fact that he could not really help it. He was super grateful, which was fine because what choice did I have other than to work with him? Again, that same sort of pattern played itself out. He went to the doctor, got more powerful sleeping pills, and even started hammering cardio at the gym after work to really tire himself out, and there were another couple of weeks without incidents. Then, once again, I woke up to Gavin banging on my door in the middle of the night. I was just getting so tired of it by then. Almost every time we thought he had handled it, it came back all over again. I started to suspect that he might not be sleepwalking and that this was sort of like a weird way of trying to force me out. But I guess that was my paranoia and exhaustion talking because, well, I guess you will soon see. He bangs on my door, wakes me up, and I start telling him to wake up and go back to bed. I put my head back down on the pillow and he did not knock again, but I also did not hear him wake up or walk back to his room, so I got up, walked to the door, and started listening out for him. I figured that he might have maybe quickly walked off to another part of the house, but I also did not want to just open my door up just in case he was standing there naked again. As I said, I listened, and what I heard sent a chill run through me. Gavin was standing on the other side of the door. I knew that because he was whispering something. I knew it was just his unconscious brain working, and that what he was saying probably did not mean a thing, but just hearing him whispering on the other side of the door gave me the creeps big time. I ended up waking him up by banging on the door back at him. It sucked to hear him get scared and frightened, but at least it let me know that he was for real. I started questioning why him knocking on my door did not wake him up, but me knocking back at him did. But I guess it was sort of like the outside stimulus throwing him off his sleep rhythm or something, because like I said, I do not suspect him of faking this anymore. Anyway, the final time it happened before I started to consider just leaving at the end of that month, I recorded it to show Gavin that next morning, and I guess just so he could see things from my perspective. He started hammering on my door again, and I tried waking him up by banging back, but for some reason that did not work, and he started whispering again. I banged a second time, thinking another round of knocking back might do the trick, but all that did was make Gavin start speaking louder. It was then that I heard what he was saying for the first time. It was almost like a prayer, but all kinds of jumbled. There was a lot of Our Heavenly Father, Lord, hallowed be thy name, but none of it actually went anywhere. It was all these phrases just sort of looping and spiraling until it sounded almost like nonsense talk, just like an edge of reason to it. He spoke in this weird voice too, like in the back of his throat almost. I honestly think that it was one of the single creepiest things I have ever heard in my life. If I had just woken up to that on the first night it happened, then I would have been even more spooked than when Gavin just appeared in my room. But since I kind of knew what was happening, I just went back to bed with a pillow wrapped around my head and tried to get some sleep. The next morning before I left for work, I showed him the video I took the previous night. It obviously did not show much of him, but it captured all the creepy sounding nonsensical prayers that he recited in the back of his throat voice of his. I massively regret showing him that video. I did not do it to be mean or anything like that. I just needed him to see how serious it was and how bad he was disturbing my sleep. But oh man, the second he heard himself, it was like the stuffing had been knocked out of him. He went quiet. He said sorry. After telling him I would see him later and we could talk about it after work, I figured that he would head out the door like he usually did, only he did not. He just sat down at the kitchen table and he started to cry. Later that day, I got a text from Gavin saying that he was checking himself into some kind of medical facility and that he might not be back for a month or two, maybe more. I had the apartment all to myself for a while, which was nice in a way, but I was really worried about Gavin. We kept in touch and I would ask him how his treatment was going and all of that, but he would always give me one-word answers and then change the subject like he did not want to talk about it. I remember thinking it probably was not going well since he did not want to talk about it much. After 2 months, Gavin told me that he would not be moving back to live with me and he would be sending someone over to gather his stuff. It was sad knowing this super capable guy was having such trouble with a medical condition. It was creepy as hell being in the middle of all of that. I think it would have been a hell of a lot more frightening if I did not know what was going on. But I did, and there was a rational explanation for it. It just sucked it was happening to him, and I lost his number after losing my phone. So these days, I cannot reach out to see how he is doing. So Gavin, buddy, if you just so happen to be listening to this somehow, I hope you are doing much better. I still think about you from time to time. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. There are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over at my email and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. If you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. Check out the True Crime channel and all those links can be found in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, do not trade your Pokemon for peanuts.